Thank you everyone for joining us today to tackle some of the issues that people are having around travel at the moment. We've had a lot of questions have come in advance, and I guess just to set the scene, we're seeing sort of three groups who are having challenges at the minute in terms of their travel, and then there's another set that we'll talk about as well. But in terms of the three main groups, those who are having to unfortunately travel for compassionate reasons, those who are leaving Australia altogether, who had planned to go back to Ireland or wherever, they may be at the end of a visa, they may just have different domestic plans, and then we have those within the chamber who are making business critical journeys. So those are what I would call the active group at this point. The other group that we're hearing from more and more are the people who really want to have something to look forward to. They've probably had to cancel their plans that would have seen them in visiting relatives over the Easter period, over school holidays just gone, whatever. They want to have something to look forward to, but they're a bit nervous about when can they book, when can they start planning, what's going to happen around that. So to kick us off, maybe with Chris, what would we tell these people at this stage?
For people travelling in the future, that's a really hard one. I would have thought initially it would be Christmas, and that was sort of where the signs were, but I to be honest, I can't see that happening now. The government's going to be extremely conservative opening up the borders, there is no doubt, and this second wave, or whatever we'd like to call what we're going through in Melbourne at the moment, is not going to help issue for travel. So I would hope February, March next year. I mean, Tom may have more of an idea and an insight into that, but at the moment there just doesn't seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel. So, but life has to go on at some point, I think, and people do need to go overseas for many different reasons, and it's not just for that essential travel. We'd see going home to friends and family as essential travel, but it's how the government will react to the different situations.
I echo that, Chris. The situation continues to evolve each day, and we're working very closely with the Australian government. As that situation changes, we react accordingly. Obviously, outbound travel at the moment is permitted with permission from the Australian government, and inbound travel is currently constrained into certain markets. So inbound into Melbourne is currently at 0, and into other states and into other cities or states, those numbers vary inbound between 30 and sort of 75, depending on the day for us. So very constrained. Outbound, as you said, compassionate, humanitarian, essential business are critical, and still with a process that the government has set out, you are still eligible and able to apply. And obviously the government is in control of that, and you still have to do your quarantine 14 days when you come back into Australia. But it constantly is changing. I respect what the Australian government is doing. They're handling the situation, as you guys know, better than many other nations around the world. And we're just trying to respect that, work with them as closely as we can, and really continue to ensure for those people who need to go, who need to travel, that we can inform them as much as possible. We can work with people like Chris to ensure that she knows our policies and procedures very well, which I know Chris does, and make sure that we assure the passengers as much as possible about the process of flying, because it is slightly different, and we can talk about some of those elements if you like.
Okay, so in terms of those who just want to make some plans for something to look forward to, really the message is keep a watching brief at this stage. But for those who have to travel, we've had quite a few questions about this. It's alarming the amount of speculation and the downright misinformation that's doing the rounds, particularly in some of the online environments, which is quite troubling. So, Chris, you've become as much of a counsellor as a travel agent for a lot of people recently. First up, are exemptions being granted? Are people being allowed to fly?
Yeah, people are being allowed to fly and getting those exemptions. And I'd have to say in the last probably week to 10 days, we've seen a change in that, which is really positive. They're coming through quicker. So prior to that, if you put down your travel date as the 9th of August, you may not have got it till the 7th, 8th, or even the day of travel, which was causing huge, anxiety, whether we'd be able to go, and just that fear. So, and people, I suppose we've learnt more about the process as well and what's expected. I had someone 13th of May put in for, she started talking to me then and still hasn't, she's been rejected once and then was too scared to make that decision. And at some point if you are going home one way to live, going back for good, you've got to make that definite decision and have the documentation to prove that you are leaving the country. And most people are doing that, and we've seen that change. So that's positive. And there is, the embassy are doing letters on behalf of, Irish Australian citizens, just confirming that they are going home. They're doing, so the more info, end of job, new end of lease, or sale of house, all adds to this, you are definitely returning back. So that's a positive, and they are coming through much quicker. There's probably a couple of little hacks that we recommend. I always suggest, if all your documentation if we can put in an earlier date, that also helps. And we can do itineraries and things like that for people. With the compassionate, that's been the hardest bit. And they are coming through. And again, we've had a few people that, parents are sick or someone's sick. They don't need to go straight away. But for me, you've got to start that process. And that is like speaking to the hospital, the doctors at home. Basically, you have to prove a relationship, which sounds so cruel. So the more information, like dates of birth, names on letters from doctors, birth certs and things like that. But they are coming through, and that's just the change has been phenomenal in the last 10 days and a relief. But if someone does have family that's sick, think ahead. Even if you don't go and if you change dates, that's fine. You've got 3 months and you're allowed to change dates from when that exemption is issued.
Okay.
So, yeah.
There have been a few sort of specific questions about that. So when people are applying for the exemption, can they list anticipated dates of travel, or do they need to have a confirmed itinerary or ticket? What?
Look, we're not doing it until it's some are booking. We had someone get it in 8 hours and went out that night. So they are looking at it. As I said, I can issue a confirmed itinerary printed, most people are not booking ahead. But because, the flights are there, the options, we've got, quite a few flights into Dublin and the prices are good, we can hold off on ticketing. So you're not locked into it. That's the big thing. But I think sometimes put an earlier date than maybe what you're anticipating your date of travel.
Yeah, and also if you didn't have the ticketing, the policy for Qatar Airways as well is extremely flexible. So, you have many options in terms of, even if you have ticketed, you can hold on to that ticket and it's valid for 2 years. You have unlimited changes available on that ticket. for date or destination. You can change the destination up to 5,000 miles. You can exchange it for a travel voucher and have additional 10% in value. You can exchange it for miles, or you can refund that ticket through the original form of payment if the flight is cancelled. So we've made it extremely flexible to be able to support that. So, you know, with the support of the travel agents industry who know how to administer those changes, and us giving, you know, very extremely flexible conditions, you should be able to match up that with those movements, whether that's for compassionate or business reasons.
Okay, so if someone has a date in mind, they've got their exemption, they're ready to go, but circumstances mean they can't travel on the stated date, what you guys are saying is it's possible to change your flight. They can travel up to 3 months from when the exemption is granted. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes. Yep. It's valid for 3 months.
Yeah.
That exemption at this point is required up until I think it's the 17th of September. It's around that date. Mm-hmm. I reckon that will be extended. So, as I said, they'll be quite conservative here.
What about people who apply successfully for an exemption, but decide, you know, rather than just change their dates for whatever reason, they're just not actually going to go now? Will that impact in terms of them potentially reapplying down the line?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. So no, really
things change. Yeah. Yeah.
The key is to have your application approval ready, have all the information to hand, be very clear about what you're doing and why you need to do it, and get the support from you know, the embassy, Austrade, whoever, in terms of getting that through. I have a couple of questions just from the audience that I'll throw to you. What is considered compassionate grounds, and what support is required for that sort of application?
Well, compassionate is family, sickness, death, God forbid. That's the main thing. You definitely need a letter from the hospital, from the doctor, stating, you know, the illness, the situation, and at what, you know, stage how sick the person is. I also think that you need to have like your own date of birth and details, full name, plus say if it's, you know, your dad, his date of birth, details, because we then say also include the birth certificate. So you need to prove that relationship. So I don't think it can just be a friend. It really has to be family, and being able to support that relationship connection. And it's hard to say that to people, you know, when they're going through such a hard time. No, it's nearly cruel, but I just think the more you have, the better, to prove that that person is sick. You know, we had someone, now this is a few weeks back, so I get that it's different, but the brother had passed away, and, you know, they were then asking for death certificates. And of course, death certificates are not issued straight away. They come weeks later. So again, we just had to get letters from the hospital. You know, he did get it within a few hours of travel, but it's a process that's not pleasant. I think it's cruel. Yeah.
Okay, so this is not open slather for people to, you know, go to their second cousin's wedding or things like that. This is
no, definitely not.
Compassionate reasons.
Yeah.
Where there is serious illness or bereavement, and that's absolutely understandable. Tom, I'll maybe throw this one to you, which has come from a potential business traveller who, you know, will have an exemption, but has a concern in terms of, you know, infection control, that onboard experience. And I guess you've recently arrived into Australia from overseas. What's that airport experience, on board experience like?
Yeah, so I did the reverse. I came in. It's definitely quiet, both in the terminals, both in Europe, and then obviously in Doha, and then through to Australia. So you definitely feel the difference on the ground experience, and it's obviously the airports, all the shops and everything are closed. But the onboard experience isn't really too different, apart from all of the cabin crew are wearing fully protective clothing, so disposable suits, masks, and face screens. And also the passengers are also provided with the same equipment, not the suits, just the mask and the face. So disposable equipment is provided in standards for adults and for children. So, you know, in aviation, always the number one priority is the safety and security of passengers and crew. So, you know, Qatar Airways has worked closely with IATA and WHO to ensure that we've got extremely high standards in terms of cleanliness, and, you know, both on the ground in the airport, social distancing is practiced. There's cleaning facilities, robotic, automatic cleaning processes through Hamad International Airport. You know, the onboard cleaning process is extremely stringent and is meeting all of those standards. So it makes the passenger feel safe and secure. It definitely feels different because of the quietness of the experience. But with that said, it didn't feel too different for me when I actually was on board and was traveling. So fairly normal.
Okay. We had a question in, and look, I suspect this might be in the category of wild rumours and speculation that we've been hearing about, but someone had remarked they'd heard that there was no food and drink service on flights now for safety reasons. What's the reality?
Yeah, I think that the reality is that every airline has different policies and procedures. Each country has different policies and procedures. I think I'd seen some domestic US travel, which was probably where those articles, but definitely not on Qatar Airways. So, you know, we're serving food and beverages in exactly the same way. I think there's probably some slight nuances with regards to how it's served. So obviously a lot more of the food is protected or enclosed. But there's really not much of a difference in terms of that experience. I think that the difference maybe that they're served on a plastic tray in both economy and business class now, and the processes of cleaning and checking and ensuring that food is safe has obviously been improved at both ends of route, both in Doha and at other ends of route, to ensure that the standards are really protected for the customer. So, you know, from that perspective, you can be very safe and secure.
Okay, I've got a question about baggage. Are there any changes to baggage limits, whether that's carry-on or checked baggage? And what are the infection control policies around baggage handling if someone's on a QR flight?
No changes to baggage policy. Chris, sorry, you were about to say something?
No, go for it.
Yeah, no changes to baggage policy at all. You know, some customers may have additional baggage requirements. We've looked at certain passengers in that respect and can support any additional baggage needs in advance through travel agents or through direct, and we have done and can do. But again, in terms of cleanliness, that standard is extremely high. But on board, there's certainly no change to our baggage policy. So again, it depends on the airline, and it's obviously you need to check that in advance with your carrier. But certainly from a QR perspective, a Qatar Airways perspective, there's no change.
Okay.
It's also just a point Qatar does have the full service, and the feedback, I mean, as you know, we've been booking so many since March. So and the feedback has been phenomenal. And Qatar are doing the full luggage. Other airlines are not. Like, they've stopped, hand luggage. And when you're going home one way, that 7 kilos makes a difference. So, that's a positive. But yeah, it's been an amazing first class service.
Thank you. There's the bizarre thing. I started in May, so I was only here for half of the pandemic. So a lot of the repatriation had already been done before I arrived. But the airline, I didn't know what to expect on my first day. But the airline has never stopped flying. It's taken up the mission to be the airline that wants to get everyone home to their family, to their loved ones. And that's been our mission internally, and it's been one that we've all been very proud of doing. In fact, most of my team have turned from, I would say, sales executives or sales managers into people who are passionate about helping people out who have problems or humanitarian or compassionate grounds, and we take that very seriously. And I'm very proud of the team for what they've done. And it is an honour to be able to fly people home and to get them where they need to go during this time. So yeah, we became the largest airline in the world, both in terms of passenger and cargo, and the largest airline ex-Australia, with about 45% of the share. And so we will continue to do that through this whole experience. And we're proud and honoured to be doing that and to be able to take the passengers where they need to go.
What are you both seeing at the minute in terms of where the demand is at the minute for people who are either repatriating or going on compassionate grounds? Is there much difference between the cities?
Right now, we're at daily Sydney, daily Melbourne, 4 a week Perth, and 3 a week Brisbane. And so Brisbane was just launched just only a few weeks ago, and we had some really, really strong demand from Queensland. So really happy to be flying out of there, and hopefully that's continuing through the rest of the year. We're at capacity in terms of what we can permitted to fly out of capital cities from Australia at the moment, as per our agreement with the Australian government. So we hope to be able to extend that and continue to fly out of the major capital cities for the foreseeable future. And to be honest, if we could, we would fly more, but it's based on supply and demand. So the inbound flights are very constrained at the moment. They're coming in full of cargo, and then with these capacity constraints, and then the outbound flights are doing better than inbound. And those numbers that we've got, we're filling them quite well on the outbound, and hopefully that will continue. As Chris alluded to, the ability for passengers to travel, I think the government is improving that process, and we are seeing a few more green shoots over those business travel, essential business travel. And I think that's driven by the fact that it's been so long, and some business passengers have said to me recently, I can't neglect my businesses overseas anymore. I need to go, otherwise they will, they're at that pivotal point. They need to go and work on them. They need to be there. They can't do the business over Zoom. They need to make it a success. So I hope that the government continues to support those reasons, and the signs seem to be positive for that. And so we will continue to fly from all of those services, certainly based on our current position. The natural supply and demand doesn't exist right now. There's intent to travel, but there's permission to travel. Those are very different things. And governments control how and where that permission to travel is happening, and obviously each country has those different regulations, and so they're beginning to see some countries in Asia certainly allow some more essential business travel to be expanded beyond what Australia is doing. So Japan is talking about open, safe corridors, green corridors, whatever you want to call them, in terms of safety, and allowing sort of a business travel to start to flow between them. The next stage for countries and for us is domestic travel is happening in most markets. Australia, again, still fairly limited. Domestic travel is first to go. So in China, domestic travel's happening. In Japan, it's happening. In Europe, it's happening in some limited ways. The next stage will be safe corridors, but if and when that happens, will be, it will be open, and seems to be months away rather than weeks away in some cases. And Australia is going to take a very, I would say, sensible and secure approach to that. It seems like certainly we seem to be more on a mission to eradicate COVID completely before we open up doors, and then when we do, we're really going to be very controlled about that, whereas other countries have different policies. So it's as I said at the beginning, it's very much an evolving situation. IATA released a really smart graph where you can hover over the country to see what the rules and regulations are. It's updated very regularly. It's on my LinkedIn post if anyone wants to see it. And you can see what the rules are for entering and exiting that country. But I would suggest contacting Chris or contacting your travel agent to find out the rules and regulations for entry into any countries. The trade relationship in Australia is the backbone of our success, and having those relationships with the client is crucial. So we're here to support both corporate clients and trade partners, and if there is any examples of problems, then the first port of call is to speak to your travel agent. If you are trying to resolve an issue, if there is an issue, then Chris has the contacts for us, and my team and I will do absolutely anything possible to help out the customer. We'll be very open and honest with you guys to tell you why or what we can do. Certainly at the moment, I'm very focused on ensuring I can get key individuals back into Australia because of these capacity constraints. If there is any stranded children or family or people who are sick and need to get home, then we're prioritizing those over anyone else. And so, working with your agents to speak directly to us is key, and you can assure that we're here to back you and to support you in any way we can.
One final question that I had was, we heard about the green list that Ireland published about, I think inside the last 24 hours, about the countries where those 14 days passenger locator forms and restricting your movements wouldn't apply to. Look, I guess we probably hope rather than expectation that Australia would be on that list. It wasn't there, but I guess it did bring up another question around whether, because we have to change planes along the way, there is no direct flight between Australia and Ireland. So if Australia appeared there, will you be classified as an Australian arrival or as X your transit point, which is a pretty big difference.
That's become an issue for us actually as of yesterday. We've got elite athletes going to the UK, and of course Australia is on the list in the UK that they don't have to isolate. However, we can't fly direct. There's a stop. So unfortunately, some of the countries that we stop, Doha or Qatar, are not included. So they will have to isolate. So it's a good one. It was such a bad, it's frustrating, but there are some other cities or countries where you can transit. So I hadn't even thought of it. So it's a big issue. Why would you include Australia when there's no direct flight? That was the UK government. Ireland will probably end up doing the same when they do a bigger list. They've really just focused on Europe at the moment. And it's quite a grey area with that list as well. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just the every day is just another challenge. It's frustrating. But we'll work through and you learn. You're just learning something every day.
Yeah, I think we're all learning to do things that we didn't expect that we would be doing at the start of this year. Thank you both for taking a bit of time to, I guess, debunk some of the myths and just give people some really straight advice around what's happening. I mean, summing up as I understand it, for those who do have a genuine need to travel and seek an exemption. Exemptions are available, but you need to actually have a solid case and your ducks in a row in terms of your evidence. The airport experience for the time being is going to be a bit unusual. On board is going to be a different set of circumstances, but it's really heartening to hear the work that's being done to make the travel experience as safe as possible. And I guess the overwhelming thing from what we saw in March, April, and what we're seeing now, you know, one of Chris's catchphrases is, "Without an agent, you're on your own." I think it's never been as important to understand that. And you know, for members who are listening to this back, you know, if you have questions, pick up the phone, speak to Chris. She's a wealth of information. You know, she understands what's happening. She has Tom and his team on the end of the phone to cross-check things. It's really, really worthwhile. Thanks very much for coming on. Thanks to all of our audience for your questions, the easy ones and the hard ones. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Barry. Great.